This is Talking Foreign Policy, a critical look at Canada's role abroad, and I'm Yves Engler. Today, we will be talking about a recent incident with Canadian Foreign Policy Institute board member Tamara Lorincz, longtime peace activist, and being targeted by Canadian intelligence for her work against the NATO proxy war. So first of all, and we'll discuss also a bit broader the war and Canada's role in Ukraine. First of all, Tamara, thanks for coming on to Talking Foreign Policy. And can you just tell us what happened at the airport, I believe it was 2 days ago, with border security and CSIS?
Yes, so I was in Russia for 2 weeks. I attended the Eurasian Women's Forum, the BRICS Women's Meeting, and a peace conference on making the Arctic and the Baltic Sea zones of peace. And I also attended academic meetings at St. Petersburg State University and also in Moscow at McGill University. And I had other meetings, for instance, with a think tank called the Institute for US and Canadian Studies. So I had a packed program for 2 weeks, and I was on my way home on Wednesday, October 2nd, and I was going from Moscow to Istanbul, Istanbul to Toronto. And when I got off the plane, I went through the first area, which was passport control. I got my little white paper declaring that I had nothing. I didn't buy a lot of souvenirs, and then I went through passport, and I was all clear. But just as I was, walking towards the luggage carousel area, a border security agent, stopped me to have a look at the white slip that I had from passport control in my declaration, and asked me more about how I was coming into Canada. So he said, where are you flying in from? And I said, Turkey, from Istanbul. And he said, where else have you traveled today? Or where else have you been today? And I said, well, I came from Moscow to Istanbul and then back to Canada. And then he took my declaration and he wrote the initials BIO on it. And I now realize that this was for greater border inspection. So after I got my luggage, I was taken to a securitized room, a separate, wing off the luggage area, by this border security agent. So everybody else on the plane from Turkey, there was probably 300-400 people on the plane. When they picked up their luggage and they had their little white paper, they were all exiting the airport to leave and to go home. But I was not permitted to leave the airport. Like I said, this border security agent said that I needed to come with him and have an examination. So I ended up speaking to him for probably an hour, asking questions, where I had been, what I had done, my PhD work at the university, my work for a women's peace organization. And then he asked to inspect my luggage. And he spent a long time. Every single bag that I had with me, every pocket was checked, and all of my papers were looked at. And the papers that he was particularly interested in was my literature opposing NATO. And I asked him what he was looking for, and he said to me, I'm looking for contraband and drugs. And I said, do you really think that I am carrying drugs into Canada? And he said, yeah, I'm worried about it. And so, I just found this surprising. But the things that he was interested in, of course, like I said, was this literature that I had opposing NATO, and he, anything to do with Russia he was interested in. So I had some souvenirs, and I had to, take them all apart and show them to him. And then when I was finished with that examination with border security, just as I was trying to leave that area, a CSIS agent came out and said that he would like to speak with me. And And so there was another small room, and I proceeded to have a conversation with him. He did not let me record the meeting with him. I asked him if the room was recording what I was saying, and he said that it wasn't. But this was a CSIS agent that would not give me his full name. He quickly showed his badge. He wouldn't give me any other identification information like, an agent number. I couldn't look at his badge again and, take a picture or anything like that. But he did tell me that he's been an agent for 20 years and he's responsible for Southwestern Ontario. And he is monitoring people on the left. And so he has been following me, he said, for a while. And he knows that that I'm well known, not just in the public, he said, but also by the government. And so this indicated to me, of course, that, they're tracking me. And at one point of our conversation, when I was telling him about my perspective on the war in Ukraine, he just kind of interjected in a very strange, kind of intimidating way, said to me, "Are you still living in Waterloo on Chesapeake Crescent?" And it was he made these kinds of comments throughout our conversation that I did find very very like invasive and intimidating. And I tried not to reveal very much personal information, and I did actually try to harness the conversation with the CSIS agent to say that I was very I very much opposed CSIS not telling the truth to the Canadian public about the war in Ukraine and about Russia. And so I tried to direct the conversation away from him and focus on my concerns about how our intelligence agency is operating in this country. I think that it's actually increasing insecurity in Canada. I think that it's deceiving the Canadian public. And and I was very concerned. But our conversation ended with the CSIS agent by him saying to me that he wanted to meet with me again. And he was very much wanting to have another in-person meeting with me in Waterloo, where I live. And I said to him, it was only on the condition that I had an opportunity to go to Ottawa and speak to his supervisors about the conduct of CSIS. So until I get my meeting in Ottawa, I'm not meeting with CSIS again.
Well, that's the thing, right? They could at any time they could email you. They know your address, so they could show up at your door, even, or they could call you if they're being a little bit more respectful. Call you at the university, at the Balsillie school where you have an office and stuff like that. The fact that they do it at the airport where they have the power over you is, I think, obviously very revealing of that kind of power dynamic where they're when you are coming back into the country, your rights are quite restricted, and the border security does have the ability to to ruffle through your stuff and to basically not allow you to go and stuff like that. I don't know exactly. I presume CSIS also has the right to then intercede, as they did. But yeah. So now you said you kind of you touched on it already, but maybe more. They were interested in the NATO question and Russia. I presume, of course, they didn't want to have that debate, but that was sort of, they were looking at what you had done in Russia. And can you maybe just give a little bit more about what have you done in Russia? You mentioned a little bit, but you did different kind of peace and academic conferences. And then maybe just a little bit, a bit broader, because we are in the situation where we're getting more and more of these stories. The Americans have indicted people claiming they're Russian agents. And there's stories of right-wing Canadians who were accused of being working with RT as part of this sort of Russia influence operation. So there are a lot of these voices floating around of basically saying that Russia's destroying our democracy and we have to weed out the Russian agents. And that's, of course, what CSIS was, I think, suggesting with you is kind of where they're trying to go with things. But yeah, can you just sort of discuss a bit more of what they asked, and then maybe broaden it a little bit about politically?
Yes, and Eve, let me just also add that in the past 2 years, I've been through the Toronto International Airport about 7, 8 times. And this is the first time that I've ever been separated and ever been, examined in this way, interrogated by border security, and the first time by CSIS. And, I'm on a plane with almost, 400 people, and no one else was in that room but me. I was the only one examined. And border security and CSIS did say, they were very concerned about, me having gone to Russia, and that was what was of concern and of interest to them. And so, this is why they were focusing on me. But in Russia, I was invited to attend as a representative of two women's organizations, the Canadian Voice of Women for Peace and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom Canada, to attend this big Eurasian Women's Forum. And this forum was attended by about 2,000 women from 126 countries. So there were huge contingents of women from South Africa, a big delegation from India and from China, and from Central American countries, all across Africa and the Middle East. I was, meeting women from Kazakhstan and Mongolia. It was amazing. I was able to interact with women that I don't often get a chance to. And these were also very, very senior women, deputy foreign ministers, senior diplomats, executive directors of non-governmental organizations from these countries. So, it was a very big event. It was extremely well organized. And the theme was women strengthening peace and global cooperation. So, the theme of the conference was trying to bring women together to figure out ways that we could have a more peaceful world. So this is very much, in the mandate of VOW and WILP, these women's organizations that I'm a member of. And I also attended a BRICS meeting. This was great to observe this important meeting. BRICS is a really important development. There's going to be the next big BRICS meeting taking place in Kazan. So I got to, spend time with learning more about the BRICS initiative. And then after this 3-day event was over, I attended another full 2-day peace conference that was attended by approximately 100 people, virtually and in person, in St. Petersburg again. And this was a conference that was dedicated to peace, nature, and cooperation in the Baltic Sea and in the Arctic. And in both the Eurasian Women's Forum and at this peace conference in St. Petersburg, I was invited to give presentations. For instance, I gave a presentation on peace in diplomacy and geopolitics, on creating a zone of peace in the Arctic. And this was an important way for me and the organizations that I'm with to build peace with Russia and with other countries, and find ways how we can end this war in Ukraine. Everyone wants to end this war in Ukraine, and our position is sending more weapons to Ukraine is not the answer. We need to have a negotiated settlement, stop sending weapons, and have a lasting, peace architecture in the region that brings Russia in. So, that's what I was doing in St. Petersburg for the first week. I also said that I had a meeting with an academic who does Arctic security at St. Petersburg State University. And then I had another full week in Moscow. And my intention and I had a meeting in Moscow with the Canadian embassy, with the charge d'affaires at that embassy, at Canada's embassy. And all of the work that I was doing was trying to make connections, trying to understand the Russian position, trying to find ways, to peace build, because we need to end the war in Ukraine, and we need to cooperate on the global challenges that we have around climate change, poverty, and the need for development.
And like you mentioned, you've been to some climate summits in recent months or recent years. You've been to different international travel for other academic stuff. So this sort of targeting is obviously a Russia-related stuff. Now, the Canadian government, of course, is going in the opposite direction. About 2 weeks ago, Justin Trudeau said there was a meeting between Biden and Keir Starmer, the Labour leader of the Prime Minister of the UK, and around the whole question of okaying Ukraine to fire these missiles 300 kilometers into Russia. And Biden has been resisting that. Starmer is pushing for Biden to okay that. And these missiles are operated by NATO intelligence, satellites, and stuff like that. So it's a direct NATO role. And the Russians have been pushing back hard against that. Biden so far has not okayed that. Trudeau came out, and amidst this discussion, and apparently is dividing the administration and the Biden administration, he came out very strongly in favor, said, yes, let's give the Ukrainians the ability to fire 300 kilometers into Russia with these missiles. And yeah, so, how do you see this sort of Canada's role? Obviously, Canada's been an aggressive proponent of NATO expansion. Canada was involved in the 2014 coup against Yanukovych. Canada pushed Operation Unifier, pushing, training and during the low-level civil war and sort of proxy war with Russia going back to 2015. But how do you see sort of, Canada's role in recent months, or for that matter, did the Charge d'Affaires in Moscow say anything about Canada's position that's of interest? Just on the broader political question of that war that's very much a lively, hot, dangerous conflict.
So Canada continues to support, sending weapons that are prolonging a very dangerous war against a nuclear armed state. This is putting all of us at greater risk. So this is something that I said to the Canadian embassy in Moscow. I also said to the CSIS agent, why is Canada prolonging a war that is risking a nuclear escalation and, making us all much more insecure? Why aren't we trying to negotiate peace here? I mean, this is a real threat to all of us. And Russia has repeatedly said that there are red lines, Russia expressed opposition to the F-16s. The F-16s are a dual capable fighter jet that can carry conventional weapons and nuclear weapons. And what did Canada do? Instead of saying, yes, let's end this war, said, we're going to invest in training Ukrainian pilots to fly the F-16s. And now our government is saying that they support Ukraine firing long-range missiles into Russia. I mean, this is so dangerous. This really needs to end. And I think that Canadians need to pause and question, why is it that we're continuing to send weapons and prolong this war in Ukraine when so many Ukrainians are dying and are injured, and the same thing on the Russian side. And then again, we have this serious nuclear risk. So, I put these questions and I didn't get any answers from the Canadian embassy or from CSIS, and so it's going to be really up to us, to educate ourselves about what's going on, and then also to find ways to build peace. So I'm encouraging more people to go to Russia, to go to China, to go to other countries, and to learn about these countries, and then find ways that we can end war and live cooperatively with other countries. That's just really what we need. One of the things that I put to the CSIS agent is, why in Canada do we not have an agency or a department that's working to end war and to build peace? I mean, why is CSIS wasting its time going after peace activists and not trying to help end this war in Ukraine? So
I should say, I know you have to go, but antiwar.com last night published a piece where they said that the Israelis actually blew up some humanitarian aid, possibly military equipment, but humanitarian that came from Iran into Syria in Jabal, right next to the Russian base that's there. And Russia apparently fired anti-ballistic, or whatever, the Iron Dome type thing, what are they wording right now, to shoot out some of these missiles. But there's even a possibility of the expanding war in the Middle East to get linked up with the NATO proxy war Ukraine. And really, I mean, I think very, very unlikely at this point still, but the odds of this have kind of gone up drastically in the past 10 days, considering what's happening in the Middle East. This is something that we should certainly be concerned about. Now, you're also, if you have any more comments on this broader geopolitics, but you're also going to be participating in this event on October 9th around academics, and it fits kind of into CSIS targeting you of the dissent or the suppression of critical discussion of Canadian foreign policy within academia. If you have any final comments.
Yes, Eve, and let me just touch on your point about the connection between this terrible genocide in Gaza and conflagration in the Middle East and the NATO proxy war in Ukraine. This is not just a two-front war, these two regions, but it also includes what we're doing, provoking a war with China in the Indo-Pacific. So we really need to see it, connected in these three regions. And so this is why it's so important for all of us to do what we can to try to end these wars in these three fronts. We don't want a global war. I mean, this would just be absolutely catastrophic. So and it's these kinds of issues that we should be talking about, very critically and, deeply at the universities. And our universities are failing us right now in Canada. We are not having the good critical debate that we should be having about what is actually going on. There's very little like evidence-based analysis and good, robust debate about, Canada's role in all of this and how we get to peace. So, for instance, at my institution, we've had very little, very little discussion about what's really going on with the war in Ukraine or this genocide in Gaza. No critical assessment of how Canada is exacerbating these conflicts. There's been, no discussion about how we get to peace. Instead, what we're seeing at Canadian universities is reproducing and supporting the government narrative about what is going on, and this is just really problematic. And there's this narrowing of debate on campuses. There's this disciplining. We see it very much on what's happening with students who are speaking out for Palestine, and it's very difficult for us to, for instance, give the Russian perspective, and not be labeled supporting Putin. But it's important for us, for strategic empathy, for understanding the roots of this conflict and how we end it, is to be able to hear the Russian perspective, to hear the Palestinian perspective, to hear from China, how they see NATO expansion in their region, how they see, US and Canadian foreign policy. And so we should be having these debates at the university, and we're not. And this is why I'm really glad we're going to be having this webinar coming up on October 9th, and I encourage people to participate.
And it's the launching of a new initiative around opening up space in academia to have critical perspective on Canadian foreign policy.
It's what we desperately need.
So thanks a lot for coming on to Talking Foreign Policy. And I'm sure we're going to keep following this. If you have any follow-up calls from or visits from CSIS agents, maybe we'll do a future discussion of that. Thanks a lot, Tamara.
Thanks, Steve. Okay.